3, 2, 1. Let's go! I like it. Well, because it's the Zoom thing. It's there's a lag, and you never quite figure out how much the lag. But man, I am the host of the PBE podcast, Troy Tittlemeyer, joined by Stan Keith from Magma Chem Research Institute as co-host for this episode, and we have Eric Anderson on this show from Synmax, and a ton of really cool conversations and little tidbits has come out. But certainly, what dropped out from the show for me is Synmax ability to provide a new data set or a new form of information when it comes to drilling rigs and frac crews and the actual action that's going on in the ground. You know, these frac crews, these men and women that are out there supplying the oil and gas to the refineries to keep the supply and demand and the commodity prices and all that stuff balanced and working. They're imaging that stuff, daily, processing it, putting in some AI that make sense of it all. I mean, this show was fascinating for me, is understanding programming a little bit more, the computer aspect of this a little bit more, but also really how it has an effect to deliver information about the processes and the operations of our business. And this is really, really valuable information at this time. That's what I got from the show. Stan, what'd you get?
We got to talk to this guy some more.
Anytime, guys.
So yeah, we will definitely stay in touch. What dropped out for the show for you, sir?
I probably said too much, but you know what? It's fine. Let's put it out there. I'll deal with the consequences later. I'm sure I pissed off somebody, right? Maybe it was the free country comment about Twitter. Maybe BHP didn't like me spreading rumors. I don't know.
Oh, BHP!
I got a
rumors.
big mouth, but yeah, we'll see what drops out of the show for me. Maybe I will have to go to Discovery Channel. Maybe I'll need a new job after this.
Yeah, same.
We could turn this into a reality show, I'm sure.
This episode is brought to you by Atlas. Atlas is the Permian Basin's leading maintenance and repair service center. We provide full-service, bumper-to-bumper maintenance, repair, and diagnostics for all makes and models of the most in-demand cars, trucks, and SUVs. We also provide the same full-service solutions to keep your fleet running and 100% DOT compliant. Our pump division also provides the industry with the shortest turnaround times, keeping your transfer and injection pumps in the field where they belong. Our technicians and staff are eager to work with you and are willing to do what you need when you need it. Parts, service, and a desire to exceed your expectations are what set us apart from the rest. Call Atlas today at 432-245-5858 or visit us at www.atlas-ustx.com. This episode of PBE Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Geolog. Geolog offers cost-effective, lab-quality, quantitative, real-time formation evaluation and reservoir characterization solutions to improve well placement, production forecasting, and optimizing of completions. They even have a service that can monitor bit wear while drilling. I've actually utilized their services while drilling wells in the Permian Basin, and we were highly impressed with the data acquisition process and the quality of the interpretations. These guys at Geolog are passionate about the data they collect each day at every well site. They've been doing it for 40 years. They are passionate about drill cuttings, passionate about mud gas data, passionate about what the data means and how the data can add value to an asset. They probably collect the most amount of drill cuttings and mud gas data globally each day of any privately owned surface mud logging company. Geolog always employ a consistent quantitative analytical methodology, whether on the well site or back at the lab. So data collected at one well can be compared at another well. We'll be doing a podcast with Dr. Guy Oliver, Geolog's Director of Energy Transition and Data Science, who will be talking more about what Geolog does and diving more into the types of data they collect.
That's cool. You got a lot going on in this room. You got what looks to be a topographical map of the world. You got a wizard's hat in the corner over there.
That's right.
That's Cracks of the World. That one's cool. Got the plate tectonic equator, all the largest cracks of our crust that are hooked to the upper mantle that's breathing and singing to us as we're learning more about. And then the mics, man, the mics and the cameras. Yeah, we go for it.
That's exciting stuff. So you're both geologists?
Oh yeah.
Last time we checked, yeah.
I don't know much about geology, but I did read a book a few years ago. I think it was called The Story of Earth and 23 Rocks. Gave me a little bit of an intro.
I haven't heard that.
Well, you've heard of it?
No, that sounds awesome.
Okay. It's one of those science books that's like made for people who don't know anything about science, one of those like mass digestible things about geology. But, I live in Houston and I work in oil and gas. So I figured I'd better have something to talk about at parties with geologists.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and it was really cool. It had a chapter on coal. And the thing I found fascinating about coal is there will never be another atom of coal created geologically, because it was created during a period when there were plants, but there was nothing to destroy the plants. Is that accurate, or am I just totally misquoting that?
Coal was created at a time where there were plants, but there were nothing.
Well, it wasn't created, but basically the plant matter, the organic matter piled on top, and then sediment piled on top of that, and it didn't decay because there were no insects to decay it, and there was no bacteria.
So it turned into a rock called coal.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Okay.
I don't know. Neither of you seem to think that's true, so maybe I'm totally off base.
Well, as you could see, that look of skepticism on my face is well founded.
Okay.
There's one type.
I better stick to what I know then.
No,
let's not go into geology.
No,
no, that's the best part, man. That's the best part. Okay. So what are you going to say about coal, Stan? What were you going to say?
Well, there's 3 types of coal.
Okay.
The one he's talking about, which is humic coal, and you can still make those coals are still being made in certain places where you've got enough burial metamorphism that it's cooking the humic coal layers, cooking the swamps up.
And no bugs down there eating it away.
Right.
Okay.
But then you've got chemical coals, which are completely sourced completely differently, and they're coming from the deep. And those are things like oil shales, like they have in Wyoming and Utah, Colorado. It's a place called the Green River System. And those are hydrocarbon seeps that are coming up from the deep.
Mm-hmm.
And
so serpentinization and the serpentinite muds are...
Right, and that's part of this green crap that's in our background here.
Huh. So the coal, you consider that a coal deposit?
Some people would consider the Green River oil shales type 1 coal. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. See,
Algonites.
This is good stuff, man.
That's the
We're off to a great start, but I'm totally out of my element. I'm just going to be a listener at this point. I don't know enough about coal to contribute.
And then you said there's a 3rd type of coal.
Yeah, that's type 2 coals. That's sporanites. They have a lot of those over in Europe.
Huh. Okay.
And they're kind of almost mixtures of humic and then kind of 2 end members. There's the algonite type 1. That's the real chemical coal.
Whoa.
And the sporonite is mostly chemical, but it does have a humic component. And then
it's a hybrid.
Yeah. And then
what the? Huh.
Cool. Then you have the normal swamp coals.
Right.
Start out in a swamp. And that's the classic coal metamorphic line.
Right. Well, hey, that's a good way to start a conversation with some geologists, dude.
Yeah, I definitely got my money's worth for that book.
I pulled
Actually
it up.
checked it out from the library. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Oh, so you didn't even pay for it.
No,
I didn't even pay for it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
25 rocks. Not you said 23 rocks.
Is it 25?
25. Yeah.
Get it right.
25. Okay.
They need to
maybe one of the earlier editions was 23. Who knows?
Yeah. See, the one he rented could have been 23. They should do. They should.
Or maybe I skipped the last 2 chapters. I can't remember.
Right on.
I'm formerly of an energy hedge fund. In fact, the first iteration of this project came from an energy hedge fund called Skylar Capital, where I was the head of quantitative model development. And, we use satellites and Earth observation for everything, not just rigs and frac crews, but, we would assess storm damage, right, to critical infrastructure. We even had a project where we tried to measure the subsidence of the Earth as underground caverns were being filled or depleted with gas using special kind of satellite called SAR. So we can talk about all the really cool things being done with satellites in the energy industry.
That would be fun to talk about.
Yep. You got a case
Let's do
history
it.
of that? We can dive into a part of the world and you can show us kind of what it looked like. And
Well, it ended up not working. So no, we don't have a history of it.
So you
but
thought it was...
the story is still fascinating, and the ground does move. When you inject gas, the ground does move. The problem is that other things cause the ground to move too, and it creates too much noise to pull the signal out to the degree of accuracy we needed.
So you haven't found an oil field that's filling itself up that you can image, that you've multiple imaged, have you?
Not yet.
Right on. Yeah, there's a famous one off of Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, Eugene Island.
Eugene Island filling itself back up, and nobody knows how.
Really?
Yeah.
How do they know it's filling itself back up?
Well, what happened
that'll
was it was a major multi-hundred million barrel oil field.
Okay.
And they emptied it out. And so they were told by the environmental regulatories to, okay, you can't just walk away from this thing. You have to monitor it to make sure it doesn't kill anybody. So they stuck some put some gauges on their wells.
Oh, yeah, that's
walked away for 15 years or so, and then came back and checked.
Pressured up.
All of a sudden, what's this? All this pressure. And it turned out the damn thing had filled itself back up again.
Wow. Is that the only instance of that happening?
No, there's other places where that's potentially happening. The LA oil fields are always renewing themselves.
Yeah.
And that's called the La Brea perpetual renewal, is the La Brea tar pits.
Yeah.
Ever been to the LA County Museum by any chance?
I have not. I try to stay away from LA.
Right on.
Well, it's in a park that's continuously seeping through the oil. It's very annoying because you can't put a blanket down anywhere because you're going to sit on an oil patch.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Anywhere near that tar pit.
Yeah, California, dude, is some of the most wild geology on the planet. It's basically active serpentinization that's going on there from an old subducting plate, and this rock is very dynamic, and it has a lot to do with, the mantle heating up and how gases and volatiles make their way through rocks, and it's changing, right now. And
if you were looking for something filling itself up, that's one of the first places I'd go look, because there's very active oil seeps and gas seeps going on there.
Yeah, they got pump jacks in buildings, hiding under buildings and on famous streets, and they're just pulling fluid out of stuff because they can't keep it from coming up the seeps like he's talking about. They can't keep this stuff pumped off, and if they didn't do that, they'd be oil in the gutters. Who knows?
Well, I mean, it was doing that before anybody ever showed up to make an oil field out of it.
Oh yeah, LA Basin's one of the most famous oil and gas basins.
I mean,
ever.
that La Brea seep was there. I mean, was filling when there weren't any humans around. Although they actually have found humans mixed around with the bones that they've been pulling out of that tar pit. And they have this big, huge museum that's built right next to the tar pit that has all of the critters on display.
Saber-toothed tiger, and all that stuff.
Yeah, those are the prehistoric roughnecks that fell into the oil pits.
Well, the humans they found were maybe they were sacrifices. They were women that somehow gotten trained in the tar.
Oh wow, they've identified the bones as women bones.
Oh yeah,
women bones.
We will never know the story.
No.
Well, that's a shame. It seems like this geology is probably completely unappreciated in the state of California, where they don't do much with their oil and gas.
Yep. No, they do, but they try to keep it quiet.
Yeah. They don't. Yeah.
They make a lot of money on it.
A lot of money. Yeah. Offshore and all that stuff, a little bit of out of my backyard mentality in LA for sure. But up and down the Great Valley, there's a ton of oil coming out of there, and they happily take the tax money from that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's do this, dude. The conception part of the PBE podcast, right? That's what we're rolling into now. The conception part of the PBE podcast. That's where me and Stan get to sit back and listen to your story. I'm genuinely interested in how Eric Anderson has become the Eric Anderson CTO for Is it Synmax? Synmax.
Synmax. Yeah.
Synmax. You know,
Synmax.
what's the story, man? What happened?
All right. Eric Anderson always liked programming. My dad was a software engineer. I started learning C when I was 12. I don't know why I didn't major in computer science. If I could do it all over again, I absolutely would. I guess I was young and dumb, so I majored in finance at the worst possible time. This is, in 2008, financial crisis.
Bernie Madoff.
Yeah. So I graduated and I couldn't find a job, right? Because I've got a finance degree. Eventually, I found work in Houston because if you remember at the time, oil was up in the 140s, 150s. And so all the energy companies were hiring. And it just so happened I married a girl from Houston. So it was a natural place for us to settle.
Right on.
Yeah. So went down to Houston, worked as an accountant for a year, absolutely hated it. Got a job at Merrill Lynch for Merrill Lynch Commodities, working in their commodities team. And I loved it. It was a great fit for me. And at the time when I started working, which was about 10 years ago, everything that you needed to do to analyze the commodity markets, you could do in an Excel spreadsheet. There's never more than 10,000 rows of data, right? Like, these huge multi-billion-dollar decisions are completely resting on Excel. And over the course of my career, I have seen the commodity industry and the finance industry in general go from that to ingesting terabytes of data per hour to make these same trading decisions. So we've gone from the world financial industry being built on Excel to it being built on Python and SQL servers. And that's where it is today. And I was
Where
part
are
of
you
that
from?
journey. So I'm from Colorado. I was born and raised in Colorado. Yeah.
What part?
Fort Collins.
Oh, cool.
It's weird. Yeah. Well, like everybody I talk to, and I know you guys aren't in Texas anymore, but you were formerly. Everybody I talk to in Texas has some connection to Colorado. Colorado is just like Texas plus. And, they probably hate like hearing that, but like there's so many Texans in Colorado.
Wow. Well, I'm a Johnny come lately to Texas. I'm from California, so that's why I know about the dead animals in the La Brea tar pits.
Yeah, grew up right down the street from them. Okay, so from Colorado, got it. You marry a Houstonian and go into work, and Merrill Lynch has caught you. You really like what you're doing. You're evaluating assets for Merrill Lynch in the oil and gas business, or what are you doing?
I was doing something called middle office, which is not very glamorous, but it's a step up from accounting. It's basically just calculating the profit and loss on all the traders' books, which are their portfolio of trades, right? But it was a good introductory job into commodities, and I started learning the fundamentals, and I started getting to know the business and the people in it, and I really liked it. And then after a little while there, I got offered a job to join Bill Perkins' hedge fund, which was starting up called Skylar Capital. Joined them as a middle office analyst, quickly got promoted into an actual analyst. And then from there, I became a quantitative analyst and started building all of their models with my programming acumen. Somewhere in the middle of that, I got my CFA charter, which is a financial credential that didn't end up doing any good for me, but it was still a journey. And when we were at Skylar, Bill's shop, Skylar Capital, is what's referred to as a fundamental shop, which, you can have a hedge fund that trades off of anything, right? Your strategy can be related to technicals. Your strategy can be related to sentiment. Fundamental shops, they try to model out the flow of every molecule of oil and gas and decide what it means for price and where it's going. So in my opinion, and I'm biased, a fundamental shop is actually providing value to the market, whereas the others, it's the connection is less direct, right? You could say they're providing liquidity, but they're not really providing value. The oil industry is famous for its boom bust cycle. Well, in a world where we had perfect analytics and the complete liquidity to trade, those boom bust cycles should not exist, because fundamental valuists, they go out and try to forecast when there is over and under supply situations, bring that information into the price, and keep things running stably.
You can't do it with oil and gas.
Well, we haven't figured it out yet, but we're working on it.
Do you use any geological parameters to try to keep that under control?
So I'm not sure if this counts as geological parameters, but half of the supply and demand equation is supply. And so every fundamental hedge fund builds a supply model where they we'll, look at, because it's all available from the state agencies, things like, what are the wells in this area of this lateral length producing in their first month and their second month and their third month, right? And how can you predict that out into a decline curve? And okay, so what does that mean if I add all those up, right? I say, okay, here's all the wells, and I add all those decline curves up. What does that mean for the total profile? And okay, how many new wells are being drilled, right? And what are the producers saying they're going to drill? And it's a ton of math that ends up hopefully giving you a forecast of what oil and gas on the supply side is going to do. So if that qualifies for geology, that's the closest we get to it.
So well, the thing you need to know is that what you get from the government is the known supply. The more interesting question is, where is the new unknown and the new oil going to come from?
Yeah, and then the known supply in the industry has typically not projected very well. Like, we have a big field and we've drilled 4 wells and you got enough room for 400. And so you just start extrapolating the future based on those 4 wells. And then as you get to the 15th well, the 16th well, all of a sudden
things change.
It changes a lot. And probably the operator changed already by then. And you just got, what an interesting problem to calculate supply based on what we think we know of an asset that hasn't been drilled yet. So you're talking about the PUDs, the proved undeveloped, or those things that the bankers are looking at.
Exactly. And those types of models are extremely difficult to get right because they're aggregate models. You're taking a bunch of small things and you're putting them together to see what the size of the large thing should be. So that means that you're aggregating everything, including your errors. So if you have a small error in your small thing and you multiply that times all the small things in your model, all of a sudden you have a big error. So they're really tough models to get right. A better model, in fact, I think the best model in the industry right now is just the producer survey, but it's getting worse. So the producer survey is just, you listen to the earnings calls of all the public oil and gas companies, and they tell you what their forecast is. And we're going to produce this many barrels next quarter and the quarter after that, et cetera. And then you say, okay, so here is my sample, right, of all the companies that are public. Here are the companies that are not public, so I don't have that number. Okay, now let me extrapolate that. If the companies that are not public are representative of the ones that are public, what's production going to do? And that's the best model, to my knowledge, that exists right now. But it's getting worse because thanks to ESG investing, all the public companies are going private because the public markets hate them, right? Yeah. And so that producer sample is shrinking constantly. So we need a better model. And that's part of the reason why we developed this frac model. So Bill Perkins, the owner of Skylar Capital, went to a TED Talk. I don't remember the year, but one of the founders of Planet Labs. Planet Labs is a San Francisco-based company that launched commercial satellites, right? Hundreds of them. He was giving a talk on his development of what is now called the PlanetScope constellation. And the idea behind it is very novel, right? So we think of a satellite constellation as just a bunch of cameras in the sky that can move around, point, and take a picture, right? And that's very close to what the PlanetScope network is, except that their innovation is they never turn the camera off and they never point it. So they're always pointing at the ground and they're always taking just one long roller picture as they fly over the Earth. And they have 200 of these satellites up now, over 200.
Wow.
And so
that was
they are
novel?
imaging. Yeah, well, it was novel because nobody had ever tried to image the entire Earth before, and nobody has since. And now Planet Labs is imaging the entire Earth twice a day.
And you got direct line to this?
Yes, we have partnered with Planet Labs.
Wow.
Yeah. So Bill got to talking to this guy, and eventually we decided we are going to build a better production model using this data, right? Because the rig data is very available. Baker Hughes releases a rig count every week. And if you subscribe to them, you can get it even more frequently than that. And it's extremely accurate, right? But, in the post-shale world, the rig count isn't enough because a drilled well is not a completed well.
That's right.
And they'll drill them and they'll hold them in duck state, drilled but uncompleted state, sometimes for years.
That's right.
Sometimes they'll never complete them. Sometimes they'll drill them and they'll just plug them, right?
So when this last
so
year,
you can't just look at rigs.
Yeah, this last year, you're following frac crews. You must have been going crazy with the frac crews because there wasn't a lot of drilling, but the frac crews were getting after it since early 2020.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The ratio of fracs to rigs was really high But more recently, because we've been capturing these images, we take over 30,000 images a week with the PlanetScope network. Yeah, let me blow your mind. If you have stepped on an oil and gas well anywhere in the continental US in the last 2 years, chances are I've got a picture of you.
Let's find it. I got one. I've been dancing around these 3 wells for the last year like crazy. You're going to see with a
but that's
fucking hard hat on and running around.
All right. Are you talking about stripper wells as well?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Just any well, any active wells that are running?
Any well that we can detect a well pad for, right? So there are definitely wells that, they're smaller or more conventional wells, but any well that can be fracked and has a well pad, we're taking a picture of it and we're archiving it.
Wow.
How do you know that it can be fracked or not fracked?
Well, we don't. So we take more pictures than we need and we just check them all anyways.
Yeah, and
but
a pad
if
is
we
very
can't discern a
obvious.
well pad out of it, we assume it's just
Old
a
pump jack
traditional
or
well.
something. Yeah.
Just it's got to
Okay.
be like a pump jack or something. But if we can see a well pad, that means a frac crew can come up.
It'd be interesting to see if they have a picture of you.
That'd be funny.
Now, I got to caveat that somewhat. It's a cool statistic, but the resolution is probably not high enough for me to discern anything. You get maybe 1 or 2 pixels in that picture, but I still got you.
Right on. That was my next question. How accurate is the resolution, or how much is the resolution?
How big is your pixel?
Yeah.
3 meters, 3 meters by 3 meters. So one person would be 1 pixel. And, I can see trucks and I can discern frac trucks and I can discern drilling rigs and I can discern when, a pile of drilling pipe sitting to the side or a trailer or whatever. But individuals, I can't make an identification.
Holy smokes. Now the program does this. The program knows how to identify these things and compartmentalize it. Wow. And you built that?
I did. Yeah. So I built this product originally at Skylar. We kept it to ourselves. We used it in our trading. And then we formed Synmax. We formed Synmax because we wanted to create another frac model, a bigger and better frac model. So we threw away all that code from Skylar and we rebuilt it from the ground up. And that product is called Hyperion. So originally at Skylar, we were just taking 10,000 images a week, and we had some, one data source provider, just to give us some internal data. Threw all that away, went to Synmax, rebuilt it from the ground up. Hyperion now takes 30,000 images a week, has multiple data providers, and we are. I don't want to disclose anything, but we're looking at tracking more than just rigs and frac crews. We're hoping we can milk some additional value out of this imagery.
Well, I would say to definitely start mapping out, at least if you have the ability to archive back to like 6 months to 8 months to present and to the future. I would be very interested in what you guys can develop on the water management side of the Permian Basin. There's a massive amount of water displacement, and operators are trying to figure out what to do. Service companies are trying to figure out what to do. Railroad commissions trying to solve a problem. It's causing the earthquakes, right? So you can't keep injecting. What are they doing? I've heard different stories. A lot of recycling, a lot of moving around from tank to tank, and a lot of truck traffic to try to keep the brine moving because you can't inject it is fast. I think that would be pretty interesting data set to build.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and you can definitely see the water in the satellite pictures. And not all well pads, as treat the water the same way. Some they'll construct a giant pit. They'll dump it in there. They'll truck it in and out using the pit, right? Others, they have some types of networks of pipes. They can move it around. So, that is all visible from space. Now, the question of whether or not we want to create that data set ultimately comes down to, will a customer pay for it? So it may be the most interesting data set in the world, but, satellite imagery is expensive.
Right. Yeah. I would go to the BEG or UT Austin and say, hey, give me a bunch of money out of one of your grants, and I'll build this database for you guys to look at and study. And maybe they have some money for something like that. But
hey, if anybody's listening, it's eric@synmax.com. I'll give you an address you can mail the check to.
There you go. And I may or may not have taken at least a bottle of whiskey for the introduction. Very cool, man. So I'm really, what I want to do with the conception part of the show is I want you to explain as simply as possible how someone tells a robot to think like a human in regards to find me frac trucks versus drill rigs. Like, how do you teach a robot to do that? Simply, please.
Sure. Yeah. Let me start this whole thing by saying I hate the term AI. I almost never use it. It's such an overused platitude in our industry, and everybody tries to make it out like, you're building the Terminator. AI is, can I curse on the show? Okay, it's fucking stupid. Like, my 5-year-old is smarter than the very best AI model that has ever been trained. Okay, like it's really fascinating. There's a lot of hype around it. Some of it's justified. You can do cool things that you could never do before, but it is not smart. That's not its strength. The strength of AI is its scalability, not its intelligence, right? So if I'm trying to track 100,000 well pads and I want to see, is there a rig on this well pad? Is there a frac crew on this well pad? It's not feasible for me to pay somebody to look at 100,000 pictures and click, yes, there's a rig. No, there's nothing. Yes, there's a frac crew, right? And that's where AI shines, is you can train, and train is a really appropriate term.
Yeah, that's
model.
called a training set. I'm familiar with that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. You can train a model to recognize objects. And so we have 2 different machine learning models as a part of Hyperion. One recognizes the well pads. So it's really just, we've created a perfectly clean data set of well pads where we actually did have humans go through and look at satellite pictures and draw, okay, here's a well pad. This is not a well pad. This is a well pad, right? This very pristinely clean, lots of eyes looked at it to make sure it's perfect. The more clean your data, the better your model is going to be. And then you just show those examples over and over again to a neural network until its accuracy reaches an acceptable level or it starts overfitting. And that's our what we call our well pad detector model. And then the second one just takes those well pad clips, right? So we cut everything else out. We cut all the noise out. So we're just looking at the well pad. We feed it to a model that then determines what's going on in this well pad. Is it being drilled? Is it being fracked? Or is it inactive? We don't care about it, right? So those 2 sets of models are now wired together in with a pipeline of satellite images from Planet, right, that are spitting out the location of every drilling rig and frac crew on about a 3-day lag constantly.
So the computer sees an image. The image has everything. It's a well pad and like farmland and a couple of houses.
And a Walmart parking lot and a Denny's and, it's a messy picture and you never know what's going to be in it, right? So the computer sees everything, but it knows, I don't care about the Walmart parking lot. I don't care about the Denny's. I want the well pad.
Because it's a perfect square
around the well pad.
It's just based on a simple shape. It's just based on a square. You find
based on whatever parameters are in the model that have to fit.
Yeah. So the most common object detectors, they do rectangles, right? But you can make models now that will do any type of outline or I'm trying to think of the right term for it. I can't think of it. Anyways, any type of shape that you want, right? To perfectly outline an object, you can do that in a model now.
Okay. So Ben, you get your snapshot of the square. It identifies, I'm really confident this is a drill pad, and then it wipes out everything else. It's just focusing on all the shapes now inside that set of pixels. And then you're saying a frac truck is usually 50 feet long, a drilling rig is usually 70 feet long, or there's some differences, and they
look very different.
So and you build those differences based on shapes in pixels for the computer.
It just outputs a simple category at the end that says this is fracking, this is drilling, or this is inactive. And we have a lot of help, by the way. There's a lot of ancillary data sets that go into this. So we're not just
numbers in there too.
Oh, for an AI model? Yeah, there's a bunch of different types.
I
think they all operate on the same basic idea.
Yeah. So on geology side, we do similar type stuff with analytic data. So it's like chemical makeup of the rock and all the different elements that it's made of and all the different, ratios or percentages, the weight percent of these things. And you correlate all that and you run this kind of an AI program, and it starts clustering certain elements together that seem to have a high coefficient, high relationship. And then that pops out, and someone like Stan, who's seen it all, heard it all, starts thinking, why would that data cluster, have to do with this copper anomaly that's here, or this gold, or the oil and gas? He starts thinking about the geology of it. So your computer program sees the operations of fracking or drilling and oil and gas and how that develops, and you're teaching it how to recognize specific types of operations happening on that pad in a picture.
Yeah. And it sounds impressive. It's really not. I mean, they're really, really different from each other. A drilling rig looks super different from a fracking crew, looks super different from an empty well pad. Like, you really could teach, a 5-year-old to do it.
But you have
it's
this
just
almost
operating
real
it at scale is the problem.
So you said in a few days it's done. It's evaluating a huge amount of different pads, like thousands of different pads.
Yeah, tens of
planet.
thousands.
Holy cow! Yeah, you're looking at other countries' activity.
So right now we've only turned it on for the continental U.S. Because we're targeting like Henry Hub and WTI traders for the product. But yeah, absolutely, we could turn it on elsewhere. Now, there's not a lot of fracking outside of the U.S., but I think that's slated to change in South America. So yeah, we absolutely could build an international version of it.
Man, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Anything else? Conception part of your show?
You want to talk about some of the other satellite technologies and kind of what they're used for in energy and like what what they can potentially do? Or is that a different part of the show?
Well, the drill down is going to go into let's do that. Let's just do the drill down. Let's take this to the drill down segment where you're going to break into the different types of satellite technology, what it's used for across the board, and then we'll figure out which one we want to dive into and ask more questions on.
Sure. Okay, so there's a history of satellite imagery and the energy industry, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but I think it starts with a company called Orbital Insight. They were the first ones to kind of use satellite imagery to evaluate energy. And what they did is they took a lot of the publicly available satellite imagery, right? So NASA has a constellation called Landsat. They give out free satellite data. You can go download it on their website. And the European Space Agency has a constellation called Sentinel. Again, they give out free data. And Orbital Insight took this free data and they looked at oil storage depots that had floating top storage tanks, right? So the top of the tank moves up and down depending on the level of oil inside. And they were able to figure out, based on the angle of the satellite and the angle of the sun and the shadow that they observed in the picture, exactly how full or empty that moving storage top was. And so they created a product that gives you regular insight into what these oil inventory levels are all around the world.
Right on. That's cool.
Yeah. That was one of the first, I think, uses of satellite imagery in the energy industry, at least
when was
on
that?
The investment side. I want to say 10 years ago. Yeah. But, in the last 10 years, a lot has changed on the satellite side of the business. So satellite images used to be something that only governments and big corporations had access to. And that has changed really, really quickly. So we talked about Planet Labs earlier. Another one of the things Planet Labs did is they made satellite imagery really cheap. Well, Planet Labs and Elon Musk both deserve equal credit for making it really cheap. And they did it because when they used to build satellites, they would build them for government customers. And so money wasn't a restriction, right? So they would build these, bus-sized satellites with huge lens that would fly in a high orbit that would stay up for decades. It would be preloaded with fuel so they could stay in that high orbit, right? And they were very expensive point-and-shoot satellites, but they gave governments critical information about what they needed to know. And Planet said, okay, instead of spending $500 million on a satellite, what if we spent $100,000 on a satellite that's the size of a coffee can, right? And we'll put it in low Earth orbit where it will only stay up for, less than 5 years, but we'll just put hundreds of them up there. And because we're in a lower orbit, we don't need as big of a lens. We can get the same quality data. And because our costs are so low, it's going to be cheap to launch. And we'll be able to collect a bunch of imagery at a cheap price. And that kind of kicked off the CubeSat revolution. And now, it's hard to throw a stick in San Francisco without hitting a satellite company. There's tons of these CubeSat startups that are putting up constellations of imagery. So the revisit frequency of imagery is going up. The resolution is going up and the costs are going down. And all of this is happening in real time in the last couple of years. It's really started to ramp. And so for the first time, satellite imagery is becoming available to the masses. This thing that everybody thought that it was just like, governments get it or big companies get it. It won't be long before you or I will be tasking satellite photos from our phones. That's how cheap it's getting. And so, the natural thing that everybody wants to do is, okay, how can we use this to make money, right? We now have all these pictures of the Earth. How do we turn it into money? Well, originally the satellite companies, they wanted to completely vertically integrate. That was their business model. They said, we don't want, we know that the money's in the data, not in the actual picture. The picture is pretty, but like the insight you get from it, that's what's valuable, right? And so they tried to hold all their imagery very tightly and close to themselves. And they tried to, go into these markets, insurance markets and other markets and create products, and they just couldn't get it to work, right? So now their new business model is to have partner companies like Synmax who know certain businesses really well and can create that last step of turning the images into valuable data. You have to know a business really well, right? And we know energy trading really well.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so the other thing with satellites, maybe and increasing the value of them, would be to put on like super cool filters or some way to like start really analyzing the natural process of the world, like where CO2 is naturally coming out of the earth really a lot versus hydrogen, or other things going on, fires, right? What started these fires?
So what you're talking about is a certain kind of satellite called hyperspectral satellite. So optical satellites, they just collect visible light, red, green, blue. Hyperspectral, they collect more than 20 bands, sometimes up to 400 or more, of non-visible light. And someone who's much smarter than me can take this information and they can start to tell you really interesting things about what the composition of what you're looking at is based on these extra bands that are coming in. And I don't know this directly, but I've heard through the grapevine, BHP is using this to find mineral deposits. They are using hyperspectral satellites and analyzing the ground to say, we think these types of ores are present here or there. And because it's satellite data, they can do it at scale. They can literally scan the Earth looking for what they want.
Right on. Now, is that gases? Could you do gases like that? Or?
You can do gases too.
Yeah.
They can detect methane leaks. They can detect CO2. Planet, they're launching a constellation of satellite called Carbon Mapper, which they're just hyperspectral satellites doing exactly this.
Right on. How do you get in touch with those guys? How do you see that data?
You got to pay a lot for it. Synmax spends over $1 million a year on satellite images.
But that is probably some really interesting data. One of your hypotheses about the Bermuda Triangle. Oh man, methane leaks.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of methane coming up there.
Massive methane bubbles that are drastically changing the density, swallowing ships and shit. You know what I mean? If you got massive bubbles coming from the Earth's processes that are breaking out from the crust as the Earth is volatilizing itself in time. That's what we're living in. We just think that it's all static and it's all cool, but the Earth is like totally dynamic and really changing fast on massive scales. Can you imagine this huge bubble coming out of the ocean? Man, I would
ship.
And the planes. It'll change the density of the air.
Oh, so they'll just fall out of the sky.
Yeah, you're cruising along.
It literally blow up.
Or blow up because the combustion.
We learned that real quickly in World War II. If you flew over this place, it would just blow your plane up.
Man, I love where this conversation's going. This feels like Rogan podcast. We're talking about the Bermuda Triangle.
Well, you are the guest,
but
my
it's
friend.
science-based.
Yeah.
The question I have you guys thought about that?
No, not until right now. I hate to say it, but we're a business. Who's going to pay me for the Bermuda Triangle methane mapper?
Right. Probably some other country then.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess,
probably
there's safety issues.
Discovery Channel will pay you for it.
There we go.
I mean, dude, you could be a host of the freaking Discovery show, guaranteed. They would pull you in, beard and all, and you would be great at the Discovery Channel looking for methane seeps, and how exciting that would be.
All right. If this Synmax thing doesn't work out, that's plan B.
That's right. Yeah, no,
It
Synmax.
sounds like it's working out.
Heck yeah.
Well, I think so.
Right on. How long Synmax been around?
About a year.
Wow. Right on. And okay, so back to all the things that you guys generally do at Synmax, what you're focused on. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure. We're focused on further development of Hyperion. Right. We've got additional features we want to pull in. Eventually, we want to go all the way down the value chain. We don't want to just sell, hey, here's all the frackers, here's all the drilling rigs. Because for a lot of people, that's not the end of the value chain. We want to sell, here is what production is going to be for the next 3 months, right? Because we know what's completing right now. Like, we know what's in the pipeline. So we know what production is going to be. And I think we are going to be able to achieve that. I think pretty soon, production is going to be unknown in energy trading, at least for the immediate future. And right now, it's very far from it. Production surprises can come in the BCFs per day very easily.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, my only insight into it is go to the Railroad Commission, which is like 3 to 4 months, sometimes 6 months lagged from the operator actually reporting it to the entity. Then the government agency in their database putting it into a form that I can actually read what they claim they've reported. And you're saying that in 3 days, you're seeing, I'm guessing it's temperature anomalies in production, or how are you actually seeing production?
Well, we don't see production, but we can see the active crews. And you can actually get a 1 day lagged version of production, although it's modeled, if you are good at taking the pipeline flows that flow across state lines, because all of that is public information, and you regress it into some historical data from the Texas Railroad Commission and other entities that are reporting oil and gas, right? So you can use these pipeline flows to get a pretty good idea of what current production is. But
on a massive
with this frac data, when a frac crew starts, how many wells are on the well pad, how long it's going to take them to complete, and when that gas is going to start flowing. So in theory, right, it's all an uncashed check right now until we actually develop it. But the plan is we're going to be able to very accurately predict what near-term production is with this data. Do the satellites have temperature gauges? Some of them do. That's cool. Not the ones we're using. There is a constellation owned by NASA called Nightfire. But the resolution is really bad. It's like 100-meter resolution. So it can detect flaring. You can pick up flaring, and I've built flaring models in the past based on that data. But unfortunately, you can't get it down to a granular enough level to really, tell anything useful beyond that. For me, on the geologic scale, I think that would be super interesting or useful. You could maybe see in the oceans where warmer water is and cooler water, and
sure,
and the geologic formations up and down the coast of California that are getting hotter or cooler.
Sure.
Based on these huge cracks.
There's a company in Austin called Albedo Space. They're launching a satellite that's going to have 10-centimeter resolution with a thermal camera on it. So they'll definitely be able to get you what you want. But I think they're about 2 years away from launching.
Oh, damn it. I got to speed that up.
Yeah.
We got no time. Okay, right on. So oil and gas, I see what you guys are doing there, what you're gearing up for. And you mentioned it, or your website certainly does. And I want to give you an opportunity to just kind of highlight what else your company does outside of oil and gas markets with this technology.
Yeah. So not directly related to oil and gas, but we are also monitoring dark ships. So a dark ship is a ship that's not transponding. There is a network of transponders called AIS that ships are supposed to use to avoid collisions. And in recent years, companies have started collecting those pings, right? So it's a localized system that a ship has that just beams out its current location to the immediate vicinity. So that any other ship with this AIS system, is also sending it out, and they're receiving that signal. And between the two ships, they can do the math to decide if there's going to be a collision or not and avoid it. Well, in recent years, people have started collecting these AIS pings and aggregating them together. And you can get, maps of all the light ships, right? Ships that are transponding around the world. Well, if you want to do anything illegal and you don't want people to know where you are, you just turn that system off. And so we have this huge problem in the world of dark vessels. They're engaged in anything from, moving Iranian crude, right? To drug trafficking, to human trafficking, to wildlife trafficking, to military vessels, right? And it's become a huge problem because the ocean's really, really big. And so we just don't have the ability. Yes, that's a fact. I checked it. It's huge. And we just don't have the ability to monitor the whole thing. And so what Synmax is doing is we're using this satellite imagery to cover huge portions of the ocean. And then we're using object detectors to find these vessels, determine whether they're light or dark, and turn that data into a new way of tracking ships, whether they have their AIS transponders turned on or off.
So how do you know when it's turned on and when it's turned off? How are they transmitting the ping?
So they transmit the ping just over radio frequency. It's unencrypted. So there are terrestrial monitoring stations that pick these pings up, but they only go maybe 1,000 kilometers offshore is their range. And then
are they pinging through water or are they pinging through air?
They're just sending radio waves, not through water, but through space.
So it's not sonar or anything like that.
No, it's not sonar or anything like that. And so there's a couple of companies. One's called Spire. They have a constellation of a bunch of satellites that just sniff out these signals, and then they just sell the information. So we can look at these AIS signals, and we can look at these ships that we found in our images over the ocean, and we can determine, is this ship transponding, yes or no, right?
Wow. Yeah, it makes sense. You can also follow airplanes, right? Flights and shit, right?
Yeah, but then you run into a latency problem. So most people don't know this, but you only get certain windows of opportunity to talk to satellites. And that is going to change with the next generation of satellites that are going to have instant communication through Starlink. But right now, you have to wait for your satellite to fly over a ground station to both send it instructions and receive data back from it. And most of the ground stations are at the poles. Most are near the North Pole, like in northern Norway, because most of the satellites, they fly in a polar orbit from one pole to the next, and then they just let the Earth rotate underneath them to collect all of their images, right? And so you only get to talk to your satellite once every 90 minutes. And when it's in your field of view, you'd better be uploading and downloading in data. Otherwise, you have to wait another 90 minutes to talk to it again. So the problem with airplanes is, the flight's over by the time you get the information. Right. We definitely do. We've seen planes in these images, and they show up in a really cool way. They look like a rainbow because the way that the satellite camera takes the picture, it takes the red band, then the green band, then the blue band, right? And they're just fractions of a second away, but the plane is moving so fast, you see a red plane and then a green plane and then a blue plane, right? So you can actually, we've done it. You can measure the distance between the planes on the image, the red, green, and blue, and you can tell how fast it's going.
Wow, right on.
But the information's useless because the plane's already
Come
reached
on,
its destination
man.
by the time you see it.
That's entertainment. Put
Entertainment.
Put that out on TikTok or something.
Discovery Channel stuff.
We keep coming back to Discovery Channel. I think that's going to have to be my next career move.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna definitely attach them to some of this content we create from this show, and just let them know that this is happening. Right on, man. Well, I definitely really enjoyed getting to know the company more and specifically the technology and how you're applying it. Anything else for the drill down before we move into the completion segment of the show?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Nice. Stan, you need some whiskey?
No, but I'm curious whether or not you could do instantaneous methane assessment of the planet. Probably.
Yeah, I think once satellites, the next generation of satellites, they're all going to talk to Starlink. So they're all going to be instantly communicating. Then it's just going to be like, hey, log into the satellite, take a picture right now, and you'll get it. That's coming in the next couple of years. So yeah, you could do instantaneous methane detection and finally solve the Bermuda Triangle problem.
Right. Yes. All right. So we are definitely going into the completion segment of the PBE podcast now with Eric Anderson from Synmax, synmax.com. Man, okay, so yeah, talking about the completion, talking about kind of bringing it all back together. You studied commodities, you studied the volatile markets and how it changes, and this idea that it's supply and demand driven. There's not a lot of nature in a lot of that, and that's what I think Stan was saying with his comment. How much geology is involved in some of these ideas, because there's this nature is chaotic, right? And we're trying to pull out something from that and make predictions and make a business out of it. And the reality is it's very chaotic, and there's a reason why it's not predictable. Oil and gas industry, there's geopolitics involved, plus just the very challenging ability to make predictions about oil and gas and our successes or our failures, where new deposits are, where old ones are. What outside of supply and demand, what do you think are like the biggest kind of strains on commodity prices for natural resources, oil and gas, mining metals and battery technology? What's really causing those prices to move around and change, in your opinion?
Outside of the fundamentals?
Outside of the mysterious, canned term, oh, it's supply and demand, guys, okay, I get that. It doesn't work. There's something else involved. What is that? How do you start breaking down outside of supply and demand?
Yeah, I think like any market, there's a huge psychology component too, right? And that definitely plays a factor in price, even though it probably shouldn't. So it should be purely supply and demand driven. That's how we're adding value to people's lives, by appropriately pricing energy, right? Energy needs to go up sometimes so that oil and gas companies can make the appropriate investment, right? And turn a profit so that we can have energy in the future. And sometimes energy needs to go down, right? Because too much is being produced and there's just not enough demand for it, and we're going to get an overhang, right? So the fundamentals should create this stability, but like you said, it's not, it's chaotic. And I think a huge part of that is psychology. I think people interpret the fundamentals different ways. People interpret the market different ways. And, they have their own internal biases that cause them to trade in non-optimal ways and can cause huge problems. And I'll give you an example of it. There was a hedge fund called optionsellers.com. And like the name implies, their strategy was to sell options. And I'm sure you two know what an option is, but for the sake of your audience, right? An option is a right, but not an obligation to buy or sell an underlying security. And what that means is it's just an insurance product, right? So if the underlying security is a stock and I buy a call option on the stock, then I am buying the right to purchase the stock in the future at a given price. And a put option, it's the right to sell it. So, you can either be the purchaser of the insurance or you can be the seller of the insurance. And if you're the purchaser of the insurance, you get the upside possibility. If you're the seller of the insurance, then you get the premium. Okay. This optionsellers.com, they were going way out of the money. So they were looking at the options that were extremely unlikely to be profitable, right? They're away from the current price, and they were selling them, and they were collecting a little bit of money for selling that insurance policy. And so they're basically saying, we're going to collect this premium. We're going to get paid by the market to collect this premium. And we are confident that because it's so far out of the money, we're just going to get paid this tiny premium and nothing bad is ever going to happen. And I think you can see where the story's going. Well, they knew nothing about natural gas. Okay. But they decided to sell a bunch of options in natural gas, and the price moved big against them, and it blew up their fund because they were idiots. Right. And when they started to get out of the market, because, they did this all on leverage. And so their bank, I'm sure, was calling them and saying, you guys need to get out of the market right now. Right. They were forced to transact on the market just at whatever price they could get, because they had to close their positions. And when they did this, it caused havoc for everybody that was, behaving rationally in the market, because now all of a sudden they are buying and selling at irrational prices because they are being forced to get out. And it swung the price of gas up and down in this horrible, chaotic way that had nothing to do with the fundamentals. And I'm sure it caused a lot of traders in the market a lot of angst.
Right on. That was a good
That's
example.
a huge component. It's people's psychology and their hubris for thinking that they're savants and they found this magic strategy, and I don't need the fundamentals. I don't need this. I'm smarter than everybody else. So and like, I'm sure for years and years and years, optionsellers.com thought they were smarter than everybody else because they were just collecting these premiums and it was just like free money, But then once the roulette wheel finally came up, right, on the number they didn't want it to, they lost everything.
Sheesh. Okay. So one thing I was paying attention to were these ducks, and you brought it up in the show, and you guys actually follow this stuff. So I'm really curious on somehow diving into your data and looking at all this stuff. But we saw in 2019 that there was a big problem in the unconventional plays. It was not getting better. We were getting more non-expected results with more drilling and more money, and the numbers of the Permian Basin in particular were in the billions of how much dollar from PE money was coming in, and it was just going to drilling and drilling and drilling. And you put all the well bores in the ground, and you look at a map, it looks just like it did in the early 1900s when you see those maps of all those derricks stacked up next to each other. We did the exact same thing. History totally repeated itself. It was a total waste. There's a lot of waste in the Permian Basin. And so the PE guys were going, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I went to some of those meetings and I talked to those guys and they hated us, right? They're like, I don't care. You're oil and gas. I don't care what you have to say. I'm not interested because of how difficult that was. And you see that coming in 2019, the challenge there and the idea that, okay, drilling money is probably not coming back anytime soon. What are we doing? Well, we have thousands of ducks. We had thousands of drilled uncompleted wells. We did one of our very first shows in 2019 about that, these ducks, the amount of ducks. And then we see 2020 come in, and all of a sudden the frac crews were out there going pretty, bananas. We were seeing like 100 wells fracked a month kind of thing. Boom, boom, boom. And you're going, whoa, and I was thinking, okay, that's exciting because of the results, right? Are these sweet spots actually growing where we think they are and all the geology of that? But then I was watching the commodity price and I was thinking the Permian Basin, its world-renowned infrastructure needs to be fed. That's a beast that needs to be fed with fluid and gases. And we were doing it. We were sustaining the volumes and the maximum output of the Permian Basin without a lot of new drilling. It was just a lot of ducks. It was a lot of completions that were going on. Yeah. So now we've exhausted that, and this curve is like done this, right? We've opened up this big void, I think, and now we're running out of ducks. We certainly don't have the ducks that are in what we thought were in the real good parts of the reservoir. We're running out of them. I don't see the drilling money like running back to us, right? I'm arguing that the prices of oil and gas could be, going the total opposite that we saw in 2020 when it went negative. I think we might be arriving at a time at the end of summer, sometime at the end of this year. We might be arriving at a very volatile time in the market. What do you think about that hypothesis?
Oh, I agree. It's definitely going to be super volatile, and it's all on the supply side. And your story is absolutely correct. We had an overhang of ducks. We completed them. There's no ducks left. Okay. The ducks we have now are working ducks. All right. They're just kind of the ducks that exist because the drilling rig left, but the frac crew hasn't shown up yet. And we've seen the ratio of rigs to fracs climbing. I know last time I said fracs to rigs, right? But rigs to fracs climbing to the point of where it seems like we now have the maximum number of rigs that we can have per frac crews in order to just kind of complete everything we drill. So we're at this really important time right now, according to my data, where, what is going to be the new direction for the industry? Are we going to increase rigs and build up our duck inventory back again? Or are we going to just kind of hold it steady? Because I don't think the frac crews have the ability to ramp quite yet. I haven't seen them ramp. But the last year, it's been very, very stable. And, nobody knows the exact answer, but there's a couple of leading theories, right? So number one is maybe the industry has finally found restraint, which I don't think is likely. Like, the oil industry of the last 100 years has never found restraint. There's always been a boom bust cycle. And I don't think that there's anything magic about right now that like the industry has restraint and they're not going to, go drill when the price is high, right? Or maybe there are supply chain and labor issues that are pulling back frac crews. And I think one piece of evidence that supports this is in the last Halliburton call, they tried to put a positive spin on it, but they said, we have completely sold out our frac crews, right? Like they're like a car dealership and we sold all the cars out, right? They're acting like this is a really positive thing. Between the lines of that statement is you don't have the ability to create any new frac crews. right? Like a frac crew is different from a drilling rig. A drilling rig is a unit that drills. A frac crew is a collection of a lot of things, okay, that make it a frac crew. And if you miss any one of those things, you don't have a frac crew. And, there's so many supply chain problems and so many labor problems in the world right now that I just don't think that we have resolved those enough to ramp frac crews. So it'll be interesting to see if we're going to rebuild the DUC inventory in, the industry's hopeful anticipation of being able to rebuild frac crews and complete them, or if we're going to just, frac everything that we drill.
Yeah. Right on. Well, we're along for that ride, man. And, I'm definitely, is it possible to see what you see or hear what you hear? Do you have like a podcast or a vlog or something that gives people this information, the information you have?
Yeah, well, and you got to pay for it. So you can contact Synmax. You can go through our website and you can subscribe to our data and our analytics just by going to synmax.com. I will put teasers through our Twitter account. Our Twitter handle is Synmax Data. But obviously, I'm not going to give you the full thing because that is a privilege that is paid for by our customers, right? But you could definitely see some interesting tidbits of analysis that we've selectively chosen to put out. The energy trading community is really active on Twitter for some reason, so that's where we disseminate it. Right
on. Well, I'll have to dust off the Twitter account when we do this show and help get some of these clips out there on your Twitter account.
Well, I mean, dust it off for more reasons than just that, man. Twitter's about to become a free country again, right? Did you hear? Musk's gonna buy
it. Yeah, I've heard that. It's going to become a free country again. That's an interesting concept, man. It's an interesting concept. I don't know what it is. I never could quite figure out how to make that one work. And all that social media stuff, I just, unfortunately, I wasn't the president or CEO of a podcast that really knew or had the ability to sit down and really figure out this social media thing. I just kind of let it ride, man. We do our shows and we put it out and we have our following that enjoys this. But man, I think that was the completion part of the show. What do you think?
I think so.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, right on. Well, thanks, man. Thanks again for joining the show. And
yeah, thanks for having me on.